the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare.
Welcome back to my show. This show is to allow people who've never had the honor of serving in the military to know what the military life is like, some of the challenges and the obstacles these men and women face and go through, and also to remind the veterans that you served with honor. You need to remember that and be proud of that service. 80 years ago, on June 6, 1944, American men, along with our allies, liberated Europe. 73,000 Americans waded ashore under fire. During those landings, 2,509 were killed and another 5,000 were wounded. These troops were supposed to land on June 5th. However, a storm forced the cancellation. What many people don't know is those men and women who landed were on those ships and landing craft during that storm. One of the soldiers that I know who was at Normandy told me that they had to sit there through the motions of that storm on those ships. So the next day, they had to land, go under fire, and get into those landing craft, and they were also seasick. When we remember that day, we need not only honor the men and women who got off that beach and liberated Europe, but the men and women who are still there. They were the finest generation. My guest today is Keith Pekau, served in the U.S. Air Force and is serving as Orland Park, Illinois, as mayor. He has a bachelor's in science and aerospace engineering from Arizona State and a master's in business administration from Duke University as a Fuqua scholar. He joined the Air Force and was a top graduate at Fighter Navigation School and was a top candidate out of Squadron Officer School. He is a decorated combat veteran serving as an instructor's weapons system officer. His service included 1,500 hours of flight time, 45 combat surveys, 150 combat hours over southern Iraq. He left the service to be a management consultant for 2 international consulting firms. In 2003, he became a business owner, starting Groundskeeper Landscape Care, and in 2009 founded Fahrenheit Consulting. He also served as Illinois Director of Vets for Energy. He ran for mayor of Orland Park and won in 2017 and has retained that position in his effort to make and keep his community better. Thank you for coming on board, Keith.
Thank you very much for having me.
Did you take any military training in college before you went into the Air Force?
I had no military training before I went into the Air Force.
So what made you decide to go into the Air Force?
So I always wanted to fly, and when I was in high school, I actually was waitlisted for the Air Force Academy. I found out 2 weeks before the report date that I wasn't selected. And what I found out later from people who were in that class is that everyone they took everyone they took that year was pilot qualified. So my eyes were navigator qualified. So they had enough people show up, and so I didn't get in that way. So I said, if I can't fly them, I'll design them, a degree in aerospace engineering. And then I guess the end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year, I heard the Air Force were looking for navigators. I knew that I was navigator qualified. So I started the process to apply for officer training school.
What training did you get when you went into the Air Force?
So training starts with officer training school. So 90 days-ish in San Antonio, Texas at the time at Lackland Air Force Base, the Medina annex of Lackland Air Force Base. So basic training's at Lackland, and then there's another annex that's officer training school. The class was about 150 people. I think at one point the classes were as high as 900 every 3 weeks, and by the time I was there, it was 150 every 6 weeks, because it's kind of the last, for officer needs, it's kind of the backfill of whatever the needs are at that particular time. So went in June, left in September, went straight from there to Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, which was navigator training. To give you a time frame around it, my second day, which was I think a Tuesday, second day at base was the day that I had a welcoming from the commander. As we were getting the welcoming for the commander was when the earthquake hit in Oakland and San Francisco during the World Series. So we actually felt it all the way in Sacramento. So that training lasted till roughly the middle of the next summer, so it's roughly 9 months, but it's 2 sections. There's an undergraduate which everyone goes through the same thing. I was a top graduate out of that, and I was one of 4 people that got to go to the fighter track. And then there's the fighter track, and that includes, so the undergraduate's a lot of flights in a T-43, which is a 737 that's been gutted out with a bunch of navigating repeating stations. And then the T-37, which was still around at the time, is where we flew our fighter track flights, and we did low levels, visual low levels. The jet was built in the late 1950s, 2 seats side by side. So from there, once I got out of there, I was a top graduate, got my first choice. It happened to drop, which was an F-15E, which was the newest airplane at the time. They were brand new. Actually, I don't think any of them were operational yet, in any operational squadrons at that particular juncture. And so went from there to lead-in fighter training at Holloman Air Force Base, which was about 7 or 8 weeks of training. And lead-in fighter training was actually developed for fighter pilots to go from the T-38s, which was the last airplane they flew, to lead-in fighter training to learn about how to employ an airplane as a fighter. So bombing, pop-up bombing, dogfighting, those types of things. But they did it in a modified T-38, so they were flying a plane. Kind of makes sense, actually, that they're taking a plane that they've been flying for a while and now learning how to use it as a fighter, as opposed to going straight to their new fighter and learning a new airplane and how to employ something as a fighter. So it gave them some extra skills. So navigators go there. We have a syllabus as well. Very few flights required. We just jump in on a lot of flights. So I think I flew about 19 flights in the AT-38. And then from there went to the F-15E fighter training unit. At that point, that class is about, there's 2 different types of tracks basically. There's a B class, which is what they call a guy like me who'd never flown a fighter before. So it's about 9 months long, and then there's a T, a transition, so they're coming from another fighter. So they've flown an F-4 or an F-111, and those, I believe, were 5 or 6 month courses. So went there to Luke Air Force Base and went through training for, 9 or 10 months, and then reported to my base June of 1991. So the Gulf War kicked off while I was in training. So we thought that, no one thought it was going to end in a month, so we thought we were going to go straight over to the Gulf and get checked out and go straight to combat. So much like Vietnam, you survive your first 4 missions, you're good to go, was kind of the thought, because that's what people knew. So training was real because you knew there was a war going on, and then the war ended relatively quickly. And then I got to my gaining unit in June of '91, and then there's an MR, a mission ready checkout, where you get checked out inside the squadron, about 13 flights or so. And so I was actually a mission ready 2nd lieutenant, which at that point I think I was the only one ever, just because all my classes were back to back to back. There was no waiting for class dates to start. So.
The training, is it tough mentally and physically?
Obviously I got through it. So, yeah, I think it's both. I think you have to be, everyone who flies fighters is extremely intelligent, and so I didn't consider the training to be, super tough as far as intellectually. I already had an aerospace engineering degree, so the aerodynamics and things that some of the other guys might have found a little more challenging, I already knew. But there's a lot of information coming at you. You've never flown an airplane before, so whether it's the FAA flight rules or just employing the jet, understanding how everything works about the jet. So there's just a lot. You have to learn a lot. So from that aspect, there's a lot to learn. And then the physical side of things, I was young and in good shape, and it's definitely a young person's game. I mean, physically now, it would beat me up to be in a jet pulling 9 Gs all the time. So it's physically demanding. Your body gets used to it over time. But you need to continue to work out, lift, those types. And actually, as someone flying fighters, more important to lift than to be aerobically. Obviously, you want to be in pretty good shape because you can get tired doing this for a long time. But actually, if you're too aerobically fit, it actually makes it harder to pull G's. So,
what's it like when you start pulling G's?
well, if you've ever been on an amusement ride and you feel that pressure and that force coming on you, usually those are a couple of G's maybe. So, when you're pulling 8 or 9 G's, it's 8 times your body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, it feels like 1,600 pounds pushing on you. So it's a lot of pressure, and to fight against that, you tense all of your muscles to keep your blood from draining into your feet, because it wants to pull your blood from your head to your feet. And so you're straining all your muscles to keep your blood up in your head, so you can still function and think. And that's what's physically demanding on that. But yeah, so it takes a toll. If you've ever been on a roller coaster and get bounced around, figure 3 to 4 times as much as that.
Wow.
Flying a fighter.
What was it like when you jumped into your first trainer?
So the T-43 being the first one is a 737, so that's no big deal. Other than it's got 14 repeater stations, it's not really the 737 when you fly Southwest. It's not that. It's 14 repeater stations and 1 master station. So it had a radar scope, and you could take radar fixes, and you had a table and all that. So it was very much like flying a big, heavy airplane. But I guess the real thing is the first time you strap into a jet. So I've never flown in a small airplane before, and I find myself going into a 2-seat jet, and I'm wearing a parachute, and I'm carrying, I've got my helmet, and I'm strapping into the jet, and I'm side by side with the pilot in that particular airplane, and it's not a very big airplane, so it's like, wow, I've got a parachute on my back, and I'm sitting in an ejection seat, and I've never flown in an airplane before.
Thrill, huh?
Yeah, it was a thrill. I mean, it was a lot of fun. The familiarity flights, and then the acrobatics and all that kind of stuff. It's fun, and then also for a lot of us like me, but not abnormally, I got airsick the first 2 times I flew in the plane, and then I had another situation where my pilot actually had problem clearing his ears, so he was actually in pain every time we tried to descend. So I had to take the jet for a while. So there, things like that. But for those of you familiar with Sacramento, my first flight, since it was a familiarity flight, you don't do a whole lot except just kind of fly around. And we were flying at 500 feet over Lake Tahoe, and the backside of Lake Tahoe, seeing the waterfalls and all that, it's just phenomenal. So, I mean, you can't describe it. The views are incredible. And then when you get to fly at night, later, when you're flying at, it'd say it's boring flying at 30,000 feet, and it kind of is, but you think about flying it in a commercial airplane, and you're looking out the side window. Well, imagine being in a bubble in a window and just an entire sky filled with stars.
Wow. Because
you're away from all the lights, and that's just incredible.
I know you flew in the F-15E Strike Eagle. What was it like in one of those? And I know that it's a 2-seater. I mean, the navigator sits behind the pilot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So just like the F-4, so the pilot sits in the front, the weapons system officer sits in the back, and the only thing that I can't do in the back seat is I can't turn the engines on or off, and I can't normally lower the gear. I can emergency lower the gear, but I can't normally lower the gear. Everything else you can do from the back seat, and flying, everything else. Same thing for the front seater. They can't turn on like our targeting pod and our navigation pod and things like that. There's things they can't turn on that we can turn on in the back seat. So basically, you have an operational stick, throttle, all of that. 4 screens in the back. The front seat has 3 screens, and they're multifunctional screens. And I'm sure they've changed a lot. I know they've changed a lot since I flew it, because it's been, believe it or not, now I think it's been 25 years since I flew. but they were menu driven, so they have buttons around the side and you can choose different things. You can also program them so you can handle, all the kids playing their video games now. Basically, it was a giant video game. I had joysticks with all kinds of buttons that I could move stuff around with my hand, without actually having to reach up and do anything. So I could just sit here like this and basically handle it and move everything. A cockpit to look outside. I think the key thing in a two-man airplane is that you work as a team. So you got someone that's flying the jet, someone's handling all the weapon systems like me, but the other thing that's important, I think, in a combat zone in particular, is you get killed by the thing you don't see. And so someone always has to be looking outside the airplane.
Right.
If I'm heads down working on, targeting, looking at the targeting pod or something, the front seater needs to be outside the airplane looking for threats. If the front seater's doing something inside the airplane, or the front seater, if we're engaged in an air-to-air fight, he's got the guy off the nose. He sees him. He doesn't need me coaching him on what to do.
Right.
I need to be looking to make sure that other guy's buddy isn't rolling in on us. Right. So I need to be outside the airplane. So it's a division of duties. It depends on what you're doing. My favorite thing, believe it or not, even though it's not as much of a backseater intensive job, was air to air. I loved flying air to air, and I at least when I flew, the really good backseaters, when there was a multi-bogey environment, lots of airplanes, the good backseaters knew where everybody was at, and could build that picture in their head. Now they have data link, and it kind of shows you on a screen. Back then you didn't have that. You had to use radio calls, and they'd give you, they'd say, hey, there's a bandit, 360 for 10, bullseye 360 for 10 miles. That means off of the bullseye, which might be way over here from where you're at, it's 10 miles north of that. So you got to build that whole picture in your head where all the players are.
So you controlled the weapons, or did the pilot? What did the pilot control as far as? I know you carried a lot of missiles.
So generally, the F-15E is a strike fighter, right? But oftentimes without air-to-air support, because we can defend ourselves. So everything that an F-15C model can do from an air-to-air perspective, the F-15E could do with an even better radar. So there's a lot that we could do air-to-air. But generally, we replaced the F-111 with deep strike, but we could fight the F-111 really didn't have much of an air-to-air capability. A couple of heat-seeking missiles. We had full missile capability as well. So depending on what our loadout was that day. So we always, carried. So we basically fought our way in, fought our way out. So we would, a typical mission would be, refuel, sit and wait for the time to push over the border. You push over the border along with all the other strike packages, and we would fight our way in. And if we encountered anything air to air, we'd fight our way in. Then you hit your target, drop your bombs, and then you fight your way out. And basically that's that. So that's a kind of a typical mission. And it ended up evolving. We trained a lot for low level, the Vietnam era. Mm-hmm. They went in low level the first night, and then they realized very shortly that that's where all the threat was low level, and they wanted to be up high because they basically had air superiority in like 2 days.
Right.
So then we did a lot of stuff up high where AAA can't reach you. You can't get the lucky bullet that knocks you out of the sky.
AAA is anti-aircraft for the people who haven't served.
Yeah. So they always train for the last war. So we trained a lot flying low level. Flying in at a couple hundred feet at night, flying in a couple hundred feet with terrain following radar, which is the cool thing in the Strike Eagle is you not only have terrain following radar, but you also have forward-looking infrared, so FLIR, but basically it's an infrared picture of what you can see. So you could literally take a mountain and the saddle of a mountain, and you could fly right between the saddle of the mountain in the middle of the night with no moonlight, because you can see it in your heads-up display. And you could literally fly your airplane right between two mountains.
Wow. Is there any experiences on any of these flights that you would like to talk to our audience about? Most of them have never had the experience of going into combat, and it's a different experience. And I know that pilots like yourselves had to go into some different challenging situations?
I mean, my very first combat sortie, I dropped bombs. A lot of my combat sorties were patrol, didn't actually drop anything. But my first one, we dropped bombs, and it was unique in a lot of ways. It was actually interesting. It's for those who've seen Top Gun Maverick, it's in a lot of ways similar to that in many ways, which was very interesting. So if you recall, they popped up over a mountain and it came down like this. That's called the direct pop attack. Is something that we actually practiced. Now this is not what I did on the first night, but it was kind of interesting to see something that we actually practiced that. Not so much to go over a mountain, but to basically stay low so no one could see you, pop up quickly, drop down. And with a two-seat airplane, we could actually do what they did, which is the backseater designates the target and toss the bomb and guide it in. So we could actually do that.
That was the smart bombs?
Yes, so laser-guided bombs. So everything that we dropped during my time was all, we might have practiced with dumb bombs, with just ballistic bombs, but everything that we dropped in the war was laser-guided. It's all precision munitions, so we know what we're hitting. We're limiting collateral damage. So our first mission, or my first combat mission, it started with we get what they call a frag comes down and tells you these are the targets you're hitting, and it told us this 4-ship we're hitting these 4 targets, but this was the primary. This particular target was a primary target, and as a weapons system officer, I looked at that and I said, well, if that's your primary target, you can't destroy it with one airplane. You need multiple airplanes to hit this target. So we immediately changed so that all 4 of those airplanes, instead of hitting these other targets, we are all targeting the same target. Also, the weaponry that they told our bomb guy or our munitions guys to load on the airplane was not going to be effective. So the building was a communications building. It was a huge building, and 16 feet of reinforced concrete. So basically, a regular laser-guided bomb would just bounce off of it. So you actually needed what we call a penetrator bomb, which the first half of the bomb is filled with concrete. Then there's less explosive, but there's concrete in front, so it's hardened. And then we had to delay the fusing so that it could actually penetrate first before it would explode. So we were going in, and we went in during the daytime. Don't ask me why, because no one really wants to go in during the daytime, because they can see you and we can't see them. At nighttime, anything they shoot at you, you can see. So, and we were going in a 4-ship, 16-mile trail, so we're 2 minutes apart. And the reason for that is we knew there'd be a lot of concrete dust, so we wanted that to settle before the next airplane came. The backup, I was number 3, so we were the lead of the second element. And the backup plan, if somebody had a laser that was not working, was to move to 4-mile trail, so 30 seconds behind, and guide. So the guy behind would actually guide the first guy's bomb, would actually drop because it's about 30 seconds. So about the time, probably 5 or 10 seconds before the guy in front's bombs hit, your bombs would release off your airplane, and they would just release ballistically, and you have to change over and guide yours. It's not something anyone had ever done before, so if you think about what happened, you think about Top Gun Maverick, how they were all hitting the same spot. That's what we had to do with this, was hit the same spot. And in this particular case, number 2 lost his laser. So we, at my airplane, ended up 30 seconds behind. And so I guided his bombs in. So the first bombs hit through concrete dust. You could actually see it over my front seater. It was 10 or 12,000 feet in the air. The second bombs hit. I was guiding them. I had about 10 seconds to switch over to start guiding mine, to give that enough laser time for the bombs to adjust, because the bombs adjust, and if they get too close, they can't make the turn. It's too tight. Like if you went into a curve too fast with your car, you can't make the turn. So I had about 10 seconds to switch over the codes and do it. So we'd practiced it, and no one had ever actually done it. So it's kind of cool, because no one had actually ever done it. And so we did that. My 2 bombs went in. So the 2 bombs opened in front of me, opened up the building, and then my 2 bombs went in. I actually said on the radio that I thought the second bomb hit the right side of the building. And actually, it didn't hit the right side of the building. It was actually stuff blowing out from the inside of the building that had happened. But kind of similar to the movie is that, you know, the second guy's bombs opened the hole, and the third, and then our bombs went in and hit the hole. So they all had to hit the same spot. So, and there was some AAA. You kind of hear some chatter of AAA, and then also an airplane came up. There was not a lot of airplanes by 1993. This was when things started back up when George Bush was leaving office. It was like 2 days before he left office that the strikes kicked back up, and then went back after that. So, so we had that mission, and then there were plenty of missions when I was an instructor that I had moments of that were a little frightening.
Well, we appreciate your service in that. Believe me, a lot of us watched the televisions and saw the pictures of those bombs hitting. And now, after what you've discussed, we understand that what it took to get those bombs in there.
Yeah, it takes a lot of teamwork. I mean, you know, the munitions guys have to load it. You know, we looked at it and changed the munitions. The munitions have to load it right. We have to check it, make sure all the codes are right. All the codes have to be right. You have to know all the codes. You have to have a backup plan in case something goes wrong. All of those things have to happen. And fortunately it did. And actually, number 4's bombs, we never even saw them land. We didn't see them in the targeting pods, so we don't know what happened to them. So not every bomb works right either, you know. So
yeah, FUBAR.
Yeah.
When you left the military, what made you decide to start the several businesses that you went into?
When I left the military, I actually wasn't planning on leaving, but you know, I was offered the first time I could say no to an assignment, they offered me a bunch of us. Basically, I was being offered to go to Korea to drive a Jeep with the Army. No offense to the Army, but I kind of got into flight. And the other thing is that it would have been unaccompanied, so a year without my family.
So what you were flying was a transport.
So
I understand, because the people out there.
Well, no, I was actually going to be driving a Jeep.
Really?
I was actually going to be driving. I was going to be an ALO for the Army, attached to the Army in Korea, and you know, kind of probably like the 38th parallel kind of stuff. And I'm like, which might have been very interesting 5 years before, but then I had a family, I had kids, and I'm like, if I'm going to be away for a year, I want to be flying an airplane, not driving a Jeep.
Right.
If it was remote with my family, it'd be different, but it was unaccompanied, and so I decided to get out. It was the first time I could say no to an assignment, so I did. And
Be glad Korea was cold.
And then I went to, and then I took a job in Chicago with a consulting firm. I had an option between Connecticut or Chicago, so I chose to come back home to Chicago. I really wasn't planning on coming back to Chicago, but it worked out that way. And I went into consulting because I really wanted to know what I wanted to do in business, and what I realized pretty quickly is I didn't really want to be in corporate world, so I thought I'd prefer to own my own business, and so I looked for a business locally to buy. And so in 2003, I mean, it wasn't that I was looking for a landscaping business. In fact, it was a tree service when I bought it. It had 5 people, and it was local, and I thought there was an opportunity. So, so I bought it, grew it to about 30 people at one point, and yeah, so that's why I decided to do that. And then in 2009, went back, started a consulting firm, because if people remember 2008, it was not a particularly great time for small business, including landscape businesses. So I just felt like I needed something the landscape business wasn't generating enough, so I needed to do something else as well.
Then you saw a need in the village, and you decided to run for mayor. Want to expound on your accomplishments in the village?
Sure. So I ran in 2017. Everyone says, well, I never had any aspirations to run for office ever. But the then mayor many people know, raised the pay from 40 to 150,000, which was really a pension grab is what it was. So for those who don't know the Illinois pension system, it's your highest 4 of your last 10. So one more elected term at 150,000. He would have put $16,000 more into the system, but he would have gotten $2.1 million out over the next 20 years, because his pension would have jumped from like 25 or 26 grand a year to over 6 figures. So that to me was unacceptable. Nobody was running. I tried to find some people that were running to support. Nobody's running, so I decided to run. Since I ran, the things that we've accomplished, we've just done a lot. One, we fixed our finances. We were actually really close to a fiscal cliff. I didn't know that until I got in, and we changed that completely. We cut, I don't know, about 10% of our workforce. We've lowered our property tax rates, I don't know, about 20% since I've been in. Our roads were woefully underfunded and behind. We had about 40% of our roads were in poor condition. We've got that down to 17%. Our parks, we had them rated and evaluated. They had never done that. They were fixing one park every 2 years. So parks are part of the village. We don't have a separate park district. We have 60 of them, over 60 of them. If you think about it, once every 2 years, 130 years to fix a park, to get your parks fixed, it's probably not going to work, right? So we just looked at it in a different way. Our average rating of our parks, I think, was about 2.3 on a scale of 1 to 4 in 2018. After 4 years of changing how we were doing things, investing more in fixing the park, we got that up to a 3.5 out of 4. So done a lot on that. Obviously, we navigated through the February 2018. We lost Carson's, Sears, Carson's Home Good, Toys R Us, and Babies R Us in the same month. Navigated through that with getting about an hour. We navigated through COVID, kept everything open through COVID, did well through COVID. I think in hindsight, it looks like we did everything the way it should have been done. I don't know that we knew that at the time. I would have never guessed that we'd have been right on everything. Turns out that we were. Then you look at recently the things that we've done. Schuessler Park, a big park that we have that was flooded all the time. We basically did a huge project that fixed not only the stormwater and flooding issues, but put 2 turf fields. And I've been getting reports of all the kids with bikes on the, going to the fields and playing every day. And one person actually texted me and said, it's like it's the 1950s. And so kids out there playing in the park, and they never used to do that. So that was great. We just opened our concert venue, which was approved in '02 but never built. So we got that built. We're building a police firing range. Obviously, we've kept Orland Park safe. Our crime is, last 5 years, is the lowest 5 of the last 29, even in Cook County with everything that's going on. The economy's doing well. So Orland Park, we're doing great, and I think we're an example of good government.
You also help the veterans a lot. I know you have a Veterans Commission, and I'd like to see that in a community, that you take care of your veterans.
Yeah, we have a Veterans Commission, and that existed before I got there. One thing that I did do that was, I think, pretty important for our veterans is, so there's a mayor's golf outing, has existed since the early 60s, and the mayor has always determined who the beneficiaries of that outing is. And what I did was I changed it to the Veterans Golf Outing, and so that all the proceeds to go to the veterans. And unfortunately, believe it or not, the board was going to kill that, and because they didn't want me to have any success whatsoever. The first board was 6-1 against. They were going to kill that, and they tried to do it behind closed doors as a budget, for budget reasons. And so the one thing the mayor has power over is I'm able to put things on the agenda. So I put it on the agenda to make them vote on it publicly, and you can imagine the vote was 7-0 to keep it. But we've raised, since that started, I think almost $150,000 for our VFW, our Legion, and other veterans groups, and that's been great. And the Veterans Commission, as you know, along with you, do a lot to put the packages together for troops overseas. So we do a great job for our vets.
Yeah. My last question, and I ask this to every vet that comes on the show: how do you feel about being a vet?
Obviously, I'm very proud of my service, and my military experience shaped me for life. The leadership skills I learned, and serving my country. I love being mayor, but it's the best. I'm flying F-15s. It's the best job I ever had, and the best people that I ever worked with. They're people that I still. If I haven't seen them for 25 years, and I'm wearing a reunion shirt here, you haven't seen them for 25 years, and you go to the reunion, and it's like yesterday. Just the best people that you could ever imagine. As far as being a vet, I don't think about it that much, right? I'm proud of having served. I'm proud of serving as mayor. But I don't really think about it that much because serving did more for me than I could ever repay my country. Yes. And being part of this country, being an American, America has done more for me, and being an American is the best gift I've ever gotten in my life, and for any of us to have in our life. And so to be able to give back and serve means more to me than, I could never give as much as what I've been given, I guess is the way that I view it. And so I'm proud to be a vet, I'm proud to serve, but I always tell people, it's like, you say, thank you for your service. Well, thank you for allowing me to serve and to be able to get to do what I did. I got to live a dream and with the best people that I've ever met in my life. And so I'm very fortunate in that regard. So, but what I would say to people is thank vets. Thanking us for your service is great, but thank those vets for your freedom, because that's what you have because of what they've done for you.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you for being on my show. Welcome back, and I'd like to present you with this coin and
Great.
This pin.
Thank you very much.
And like I say, I believe like what you say. I'm proud to have served, and I'm proud to be an American. I'd like to read one of the letters I received from the troops over the last 21 years sending care packages. Jim, from one soldier to another, I'd like to thank you for all your family for the overwhelming support. Your packages have become a legend over here. When we get mail, everyone keeps asking if one of your packages have come in. We are very grateful for your support and your continued service to the military. Once our internet gets fixed, here I have some pictures to send you, but old reliable paper and pen will have to do for now. Stay safe, and we will do the same. Michael Hodgin, Baghdad, Iraq. My fellow patriots, as you can hear, these packages bring joy and comfort to our men and women deployed overseas. Many are in situations that put them in danger. What's in the box isn't important, as what's the box coming and the cards that you sign in them. It means that people back here haven't forgot them. I can tell you from my own experience that you get lonely over there and you feel forgotten. I and 3 other groups, one in Mayor Pekau's village, send care packages on a regular basis. We're always looking for soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen to send to. My email address will come up at the end of this show. Send us your loved one's name and address. We will support them and let them know America cares. Well, that wraps up another show. I hope that it's given you a new perspective of what men and women in uniform do and deal with. We will be back next month on PHTV4. See you then. Honor and respect.